All right, so since we've got everybody who signed up for the Part 2 session, we'll begin with the program. What this part does is it takes you through the time and billing section, the appointments, and the projects. Probably be closer to about 35, 40 minutes or so to get through the whole thing. If you have any questions as we're going through things, don't be afraid to just type them in, and I will answer them as I see them come up. So we're going to start off with the time and billing section. The first thing I want to show you is things you can set up for this part of the program. Now, a lot of the things I'm about to show you don't necessarily have to be set up, but they can be if you want them to. What you'll do to basically get anything sort of going there is in the section on the left-hand side, the dashboard area, there's a button here called Setup Options. It looks like some stacks of coins. Now, if we start at the top, we'll just work our way down to the different sections and show you what you can do with these. So at the very top, we have what are called billing categories. And billing categories can be used to enter different kinds of time entries that you've got and associate them to the categories for whatever that might be relevant to. As an example, I may have a category for bookkeeping. And within that category, it encompasses a few different kinds of time entries that I've done, like a couple of payroll services, maybe an HST service, whatever the case may be. So I've put in a few different entries and assigned them to that bookkeeping. Now, when they're assigned to that category, in the time list view, I can run a search specifically for entries in that category. So I can call up a list that shows me, give me the total time entered for the last 2 weeks of everything that falls in the bookkeeping category, and I can get a result for that. So what it does is it allows you to give an extra form or type of reporting for the program itself as another way to list information. It is very much optional. You don't have to put these into the system if you don't want to, but they can be there as an extra reporting tool if that's something that you'd want to utilize. And there is also no limit to the amount of billing categories you can put in the system. The next section down is called Task Billing Settings. It can be done as either a company setting or as a per user setting, but not per client. What it does is it tells the program that when time is being entered on these particular kinds of tasks here as a global setting for the company, or again as a per user setting, still a global change but per user setting, we can say that when people enter time, let's say Adam here, when he enters time on GST quarterlies, it's going to know to use $300 per hour. But when Ann enters time on that, it's going to be a flat total of $250. And then we can also specify if it's going to assign it to a billing category. We can put in what its default name is for the task type. And we can even put in what the default descriptions are for these items themselves. So that way we have the ability to put in a lot of automatic things in the program, and that way there's less that we have to enter when we're saving in our time entries. This is also another very much optional piece for the program. So you don't have to use this if you don't want to, but it can make things a little quicker for you and your associates. The next section down is called the Billing Work Code Setup, and below that, Non-Billing Work Codes. So they work exactly the same way with just basically two different purposes. For billing work codes, if you're unfamiliar with work codes themselves, generally they're used for this kind of function. Let's say that no matter what kind of HST work we're putting in the system, internally we always assign it code 300, whether it's quarterly or monthly or annually, just code 300. And you can give them default descriptions so that when the information shows up in the invoice, it will show with that description instead. Now, further to the work codes, if you only want people choosing specific work codes for certain task types in the program, at the bottom of your list there's an advanced setup button. And in here you can say that when people select this kind of task, they're only able to choose the work codes that you have told it to from this list. So basically they can't choose the wrong work code when they're putting in the time. And later on in the general section, you'll see that there's even the ability to force people to enter a work code, or they can't save their entry. So if you force them to choose the work code and you've made it so they can't choose the wrong one, it's impossible to select the wrong thing. Now, on top of the work codes, you can do the task billing setup as a per work code type. So using the second tab here, again, it can be done as either a company or as a per user setting. We can get even more specific. So we can say that instead of it being based on the task type, we can tell the program that the task type already knows what work code it should be chose. So we can say that when Adam enters time using this work code, that again, it can be $300 per hour, and then to assign it to a particular billing category and give it whatever name that you want to call it, versus when Bobby does this, it can be no billing category with a flat rate of $400. And again, whatever names you want to give these, and also even further to that, the actual internal invoice descriptions on top of that in case you want to show the line items. So there is a variety of different settings that you can do, and you can make the system very specific so that basically when your users are entering time, you might want to restrict them from only being able to select who did they do the work for, how long did they spend, and what is the work code that they are they're using for this particular work. So that way it knows what to charge for everything else, which means they can't, again, select the wrong things for the system. But that is a very specific setup, of course. And again, you don't have to use it. It is very much optional. Now, the exact same thing can be said for non-billing time. Non-billing time is generally either used for work that you're obviously not going to bill your clients, or also to log things that you do around the office. So what many people will do using the program is in the business client section, they will create a business client that is their own company. And then they will assign non-billable work time to their own company, so they can run reports on that and clear out the information whenever they choose. So that is another option that you can utilize those for if you want to, but again, very much optional. Everything you've seen so far is not a necessity. The next thing we have in here are the billing rates that we can add to the program. So there are rates for the company, and then there are also rates for the user. Basically, the rates for the company, you'll put in however many rate you're going to have for the system here. The only stipulation is they cannot have the same name more than one time, but they can have whatever charges you want to put on them and give them either exact billing to the second or round it up to the nearest whatever you select here from this list. For the user, you'll only want to give it one rate per user, and this just tells the program that this is this person's default rate, meaning that if it has not been told by some other part of the program to use a different setting for a charge or whatever it might be, that it will just default to select $300 per hour, again, unless it's been told to do so otherwise from the other settings you've seen so far. So one rate per user is really all you're going to need, and then the rest of them in the company listing. The next section down are the interruption reasons. So in your timers, there are an interruption timer, which allows you to basically pause whatever time you're currently working on and then record for an interruption time. These are a list of reasons as to why you're getting interrupted, so you don't have to type in the list of the reason or the reason every time that you do that. So you can put in as many of these reasons as you want, and that way you can choose from what's available in your list, and it just makes your interruption a little tiny bit quicker. The taxes in the program are something that you can put in the system if you're going to be using the invoicing part of the software. Now, if you're not going to be using the invoicing part of ClientTrack, then these are not something you'll really have to worry about putting in the system. When you first look at your software, however, though, if you are going to use the invoicing system, you will find that there are no taxes in here to begin with. Now, it's very simple to get these set up. All you're going to want to do is just go to the left and add in all the individual names and rates here that you're going to utilize. And then once you've got those in there, you'll add those names and rates to their own groups. So even if there's just one rate, like HST, you have to give it a group name, a code. The code doesn't matter what you put in there, and then assign it whichever taxes go in that group, and that will make them accessible from the invoice itself. And finally, we have the general options section. So for general options, what we have here is on the left-hand side, these checkboxes will force your users to enter specific things when they're putting in their time. So basically, you can force them to say that you can't save your entry unless you put in a client name, a work code, a billing category, and descriptions, and whatever else you want to force them to put in. So you can choose to do that if you want to or not. And on the right-hand side, this one single checkbox will automatically lock time once it's been saved into the program. This is only something that administrators can change. And basically, if you don't want your people to be able to modify their time once they've saved it to the program, then when time gets locked, if you have it automatically locked like this, only administrators can unlock time entries once they have been locked like that in the system. Finally, the last two options here are different form types concerning entry fields in the system. If you're going to use the billing work code and have everything really specifically set up like that, then you're going to not want your users to be able to choose more than just very simple things like, again, who is it for, amount of time, work code, and descriptions. So if you choose the horizontal and simple time entry forms, then that is all they can basically select because the program's been told to do otherwise, or to fill in the blanks, more or less. If you want to give them full access to the entries, then you'll want to use the vertical form and the advanced time entry forms. And those are the two I'm going to show you. All right, so once the setup's been completed and you get that out of your way, the next thing you'll want to look at then is the three different ways in which you can enter time in the program. There are two after-the-fact methods and then one live timer, which can be done in one of three locations in the software. So the first time entry method is to simply just go into your calendar here, click an open space on your calendar, and then tell the program what your time entry is all about. So if it's based on a specific task type, you'll want to first choose the client's name. And then when you choose the task type, it will only allow you to select from the tasks that are actually on this client's file. And then if you want work codes and billing categories, and just pop in whatever else you need, tell it the amount of time you spent. And in the billing info tab, you can say what charges you're laying out for this. Descriptions, again, both internal and invoice. And finally, in the general tab, I said I did the work for the beauty salon, which is here. But I may need to bill the time to a bigger company that owns them. So I can use the Bill Time To tab to bill it to the company that actually needs this particular entry be billed to them. When you're done, just simply click OK, and it pops it onto your calendar just like that. Now, the second after-the-fact entry form is to use the quick entry icon here on the left-hand side. This one is when you want to put in a lot of different entries much faster, of course, because if you use the calendar method after the fact, then you have to open it up, fill out the details, save it, wait for it to save, open it back up again, so it's a little more cumbersome. With this one, tell it which fields you're going to utilize before you start entering things, and then just go and say, when did you begin your day? So we'll say we began the day at 10:30 a.m. And our first meeting was an hour and 45 minutes with whichever client, and we did test 1 for a rate of $300 per hour with this description. Save and next. So you'll see here it'll increment to the next available time in the list, and then we can just simply start filling out our next details. So again, whatever client we've got now, test 2, maybe this next one was only 45 minutes long, and again with whatever descriptions and charges you want to put into this. And you just keep doing that over and over till you've got all your entries in. Once they're all in the system, you can then just close out of this window and you'll see them placed on your calendar just like that. So again, very simple, very quick, allows you to put in a lot of different time entries very fast. Your third and final time entry methods are using live timers, and they are found in one of three locations. The first one is in the lower left-hand portion of your program. There's a clock tools here. The little timer with the green icon just starts recording time. It doesn't know what you're doing or who is it for. It just records generic time. The second place you'll find timers is on every task in the system. There's a green start timer. When you click this, it will know what client is it for and also what you're doing for them because it's directly related to that information. Your third place that you'll find is in the personal client's view list. Every single personal client has a timer associated to their name. So you can also record for the amount of time that you're spending on their taxes. And again, it will know that it's for this client and the fact that it's personal taxes because it's from this part of the program. So if I click a start timer here on this task, then it'll know, as I said before, what client is it for and also how long we're spending. And that information is detailed here in the bottom at the sort of center of the software. Now, once you click a timer, you don't have to stay here. You can move to other sections of the program. You can minimize the software. It will keep counting your time. While you're working on things, if you need to pause anything for any reason, in the Clock Tools lower left-hand portion, there is a pause button, which is the one with the blue icon. And when you get back to your desk, click the green one to pick up from where you left off. You can hit the red one to stop any time you're currently working on. It will come up and verify the actual details of the entry with you so you can make sure that everything looks good. And the one on the right is the interruption timer, which when clicked will pause the first one you're on, start a different one in the middle of your screen. So I can say, got interrupted by a phone call, this is the client, and then put in whatever descriptions you'd like. Once you're finished with your interruption and you click OK, it will verify the full time entry details with you so you can make sure that you're not changing anything further. When you're done with that, it moves back to the first timer you were on, so you can just simply pick up from where you left off. Then once you're done with your main one, click the stop timer and it will verify the details with you. So for timers, one thing to note about them as well is once they do get paused, they will get split into different pieces. And the reason why that happens is because if you start a timer at, let's say, 1 o'clock and then you resume it at 3, then, so you started at 1, pause it at 2, and resume it at 3, there's going to be a chunk of time in there that it needs to account for. So it will add up to the same total time, but you'll see it in the different locations. And that's why I split up those 3 there, just to show you what that would more look like. So once your time's been entered in the system, to get more details on them, you're going to want to go to the time list to run reports on them. But one thing that is nice about the calendar here is if we look at the month view, it is a very quick way to see the total time entries in one day and the total amount of time for them for your particular calendar. For further details, we go to the time list, and from here we can run searches on anything that's in the system. So I can run any kind of search I'm looking for by going to the magnifying glass in the upper left-hand portion. And from here you'll want to combine whatever search results you want to see to get what you need out of here. So I could tell the program, give me everything that Adam has entered for the last, let's say, 2-week pay period. So I could say everything from September 30th to the 10th, which is the pay period for that particular week. And then I run that search, and it will say, okay, here is everything he's entered in that time period. So it might say more realistically that he's got closer to 70 hours worth of time entered, realistic time. If there was any rounding on the bills or the time objects, then the objects would have the total rounding here at the bottom. And further to that, if there are any adjustments to the entries themselves, the total adjustments would be here, and then finally what the total is with those adjustments at the bottom. And in the last column here, we have also the total amount of charges. So if you're seeing that for 70 hours worth of work, he's only got an output of $1,000, let's say, even of charges, then you might want to ask him why the output was a bit low for the amount of time that he spent working in the office this week. You can also run searches of anything that has not yet been billed to your clients. You can run searches for what has been billed, for locked items, and pretty much any other statuses. So all you got to do is just go to the magnifying glass in the upper left and then combine whatever search results, date ranges, and anything you want to see from here to get the report you need. When it comes time to create an invoice, you'll want to go to the Create Invoice section. And it's quite simply click a client's name from the list here on the left-hand side and use one of these 3 options to create an invoice, which you can then either send all WIP to or select specific entries to send to the invoice. The 3 options are as follows. The one on the left sends the original details to the invoice. They are unedited, unchanged, and the original total stays the same. The middle one shows the original details of the time entries, but it will ask you to change whatever you want the total from the top to be to whatever you type at the bottom. So you might want to round that up to 2,700 total. The third one is more for the event where it's been some time since you've had a chance to charge the client. So you may have a lot of different time entries that you want to put on to this invoice, but you don't really want the client to see, let's say, 50 different lines of information. So in this, what it will do is it will add all the entries that you're putting onto the invoice, but it will hide every last detail about them, including the total, and then it will ask you to put in whatever custom lines of information you would prefer to have on here, so the client sees only what you want them to, and you would also have to type in a total. From any one of these options, you can do the other settings as well. So if I create the one on the left here, and just send that whole amount to it, I can show you the other options from here. I'm just going to take 2 seconds to reset it back to default settings. And this is what your unedited, unmodified invoice would look like for starters. Now, obviously, there's quite a few pieces of information you probably don't want to show to the clients. But to start off, the first thing you want to do is go into the adjustments part here. Click the gear icon beneath that, and start off by telling the general tab what your starting invoice number is. You only have to do this one time, and from that point on, the program will increment every thereafter. Also in the Numbers tab, you can put in what your company number is here on the invoice, because if you do make more than a certain amount per year in Canada, then you'll have to put this onto your invoice. For provinces that require a second number, there is a second number field. And then just at the bottom here, you can also then say what your default tax rate is for the program. In the Formatting tab, I like to point this out because many people will ask me, how do I remove the totals below the columns here? Because I've already got a subtotal, and also I don't want to see the grid lines around anything either. So the total bar is the most upper left checkbox here in this Formatting tab. And then the grid lines are the four that just say grid lines. So if you remove this, it'll look a little bit more open and clean. Now, if you want to change the color scheme so you save yourself a little printer ink, in the colors section, you can choose to make everything black on white, let's say. Just be mindful of your fonts. Make sure they are a different color from the background, because I have had calls where they said they couldn't see anything in there, and that's because all of the colors were exactly the same. So it's very hard to distinguish white from itself. So there we go, a little bit more simplistic and clean there. And finally, you might want to remove a lot of these different columns and only show maybe the description, which is what most offices will end up doing. So if we go to the Columns tab, from here you can adjust the names of the columns, the order in which they appear, how much percentage they're going to take up, and they have to total 100 at the bottom. And you can also outright remove them from this list. So I will remove everything but description and give it 100%. So this is what most common standard invoices will look like. Descriptions, total, taxes, finished. If this is what you'd like to show to the client, you will then go to the main and post the invoice to save it to the accounts receivable section. Then you can print it if you'd like. Now that second invoice option allowed me to show the original descriptions and details, but change the subtotal to $2,700. So in here, we can go to this cash register icon within the adjustments. We're going to use the adjusted amount and type in a new total. So it's that simple. Now, one thing you might notice in there, too, is below that adjustment, there is an option to put in a discount or a markup. So if I put in negative 50, then I'm giving him a discount of $50, and it will show the negative adjustment in the totals as well. And if you'd like to put in a line that actually says why that discount is there, you can go to the custom section, open up this clipboard option, and then add custom invoice items from a list of saved ones that you have in the system. And we'll come back to this in just 2 seconds. So the third option allowed me to add all the items to the invoice but hide every last detail about them. So in here, you can do it by going hide all WIP in the custom section. And that's what it's going to look like. Then we're going to go to the clipboard, which would pop up automatically if you choose the third invoice creation option. The first thing you want to do is go to the Manage Custom Items and actually save some default descriptions so you can just choose from them in future as opposed to having to type them out every time. You can put as many as you like in here. The only thing that matters is a name you can associate it by and what the actual description is. The other things in the middle will change as the days go by, so don't worry about that. Once you have those items saved, you can add them by clicking the green button for as many lines as you want. So 1 click for 1 line, 2 for 2, 3 for 3. Choose from your saved list, and then tell it what your charge is. Once you've got your everything selected in here, go save and close, and we now have our one-liner with our total, taxes, and final amount. And then at this point, we can go to the main and post this to save it to the system. So the invoices will get saved to the VOAR section. At this point, when the accounting integration options are ready, they will actually be able to let you synchronize the invoices you create and send them directly to the QuickBooks software. Eventually, that same thing will be available for the Simply Accounting software. As we currently speak, there is no specific deadline on that. The QuickBooks one will be coming much quicker than the Simply Accounting one will. When that is available, ClientTrack will be posting that on the clienttrack.ca website. For here, if you'd like to keep track of the invoices, you can run searches on any of the invoices in the system. So you could say run a search for a particular client and show me everything for that client. And then say, okay, for this client, you have all these different charges. Your adjustments are the following, with a difference of an overage, in this case of $75 more than the original amount. And this is your final amount with taxes. Nothing has been paid so far. You can use the Add Deposit section here to actually apply deposits to the invoices in the program. So you'll tell the program what client is it for. You have to also say what date you put the deposits in, and also how much they've given you. In the next tab, you can then either add all of it to one invoice or split it up amongst a few different ones. Choose from a list of invoices on this client's name, and it will show you the original total plus the remaining amount of that invoice. And you can then simply type in how much of this invoice you want to put on each different one. So I could split this up, $250 here and $250 here. Once you add those deposits on there, they will show in the paid amount column. So currently you'll be able to see the total amount paid and then also the final amounts and figure out what the difference is. There is no column that currently says what the remaining amount is. That is something the development team will be putting in very shortly, so you will see that as part of this list. Now that wraps up the time and billing section. Obviously there's quite a bit of information in there, but if you do forget anything at any time, don't be afraid to just send us an email or give us a call here at the toll-free. Moving on to the next section, we have the appointments part. Now, brand new to the program, which will be released very shortly, is the ability to actually look at both your appointments and your task calendars at the same time. So if I look at my calendar here, I can see that I have a task here on Friday the 4th, and I have an appointment on Tuesday the 1st for these other times in the system. So currently, with the version we have online, you can't do that, but you will be able to see this very shortly. The version online that's listed is 60678. The next version to be released after that will have this available. And where this is really good is not only can I work my actual meetings around the times that I have to do the work in the system, but if I'd like to see multiple calendars at the same time too, using the overlap function here on the left, when I tell it to show me all these names, it'll separate the names by color and show me their appointments and tasks on top of my own. So that way I know exactly when I can schedule a staff meeting and make sure that nobody's going to be interrupting with their tasks. With your appointments as well, when you make an appointment, you can make it private. So if anybody else tries to come in and look at your calendar, they're going to know that you're busy for that allotment of time, but they won't know the details of your appointment. And if they try to open up the details, it'll just say, sorry, this is private. So only you can view the details of your private appointment. Even if you're an administrator, you still can't see other people's private information. One final thing that is available is if you go to the File menu, you'll see there's a Synchronize with MS Outlook option. And from here, you can say that you want to send your appointments either from ClientTrack to Outlook or from Outlook to ClientTrack. Once you choose the direction you're going, you'll then choose which person's ClientTrack calendar are you syncing, and it'll do it to the computer's Outlook that you're physically sitting at, so you'll probably want to do it on your computer. The last section will then ask you what date range do you want to specify for syncing. So you can say either send everything or a specific time frame, and then finish, and it will send those whatever direction you're going. It is a manual sync, so every time you want it to happen, you physically have to run it by hand. What's great about this is that Outlook is a software that is used between a lot of other devices. So you can link your Outlook calendar to things like your smartphones and your tablet PCs, and even Google Calendar talks to it, and a variety of other softwares. So Outlook is a good middle ground between a lot of other things in case you want to export your calendar from here to other devices. And that's pretty much all you need to know about this part of the program. The last section is the projects part. So in projects, what it's designed to do is you're going to come in here, click the Manage button on the left-hand side, and then you're going to tell the program to add a new project template. So when you do, you're going to get the following window. You'll want to give your project a name and then tell it how many steps it takes to complete it. For each step that you assign into this project, you can give it its own particular name. You can give it a description. You can tell it who's going to be responsible for taking care of this. You can then go and say that it's due on specific dates or fixed dates relative to the first one. You can also give it a time budget so it knows what to allot on your calendar, a spending budget, and even tell it what it should be charging for the amount of time that's being spent on these particular items. So again, it automatically knows what to charge. Once all these things have been set up, when you save your template by clicking OK, it'll show up in the list on the left-hand side of the Manage Project window. Then to schedule to your clients, you're going to highlight the project you want to schedule, select the clients you need here on the right, and then go Apply in the bottom right-hand section, and it'll say that it's been applied to those particular clients. You can then click OK to get out of here, and you will then be able to run searches based on any of the project criteria in the system here, just like every other search that you've seen, very similar to the task list, and every other search in the program works like that too. So you can combine searching by statuses or by project names, by clients, and any other things you want to see. One particular thing that is different about this listing is in the upper right here, you can sort by a specific project type. And if you do this, it will actually show you the steps of just that project's type in this list. You can not only see what's been completed, but also if you click beside the checkbox after it was filled out, you'll see a lot more detail concerning that as well. Now, if you do have projects in the program, the steps of the projects can be searched from the task list itself. And also business clients will have a projects tab, allowing you to see which ones have been assigned to that client. And in the very bottom right, you can break them down by their steps in here too, so you can see what has or has not yet been completed for this client. All right, so that wraps up the Part 2 session. At this point, if you have any questions for me, you can certainly go ahead and answer or ask them, and I will answer them as soon as they come up. If that is all for today and you need to leave the session, then thanks very much for joining the session with me. I hope it was very informative, and you have yourself a great day.